Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In our lesson in the Muqaddimaat of Imam Sanusi, and in our last lesson, which is our first, we spoke about Hukm Shar'i. So we are still in Hukm Shar'i, and I will just mention a few things again for revision. And this definition is important, especially when we are learning the Islamic and the sciences. When we are learning, for example, the knowledge of fiqh, knowledge of aqidah, and so on and so forth. So we have to understand what is the meaning of the Sharia, because it has any relation with our daily lives. So the author spoke about the definition. Now we just go back into the definition. The author began by saying that al-hukm is divided into three. We have Shari'i, Adi, and Aqli. Then this is a definition of the Sharia law, as what we mentioned normally. So he mentioned فَالشَّرْعِيُّ هُوَ خِطَابُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى الْمُتَعَلِّقُ بِأَفْعَالِ الْمُكَلَّفِينَ. So this is what I explained last week. Last week I didn't include the translation. For those who wants to see the translation, I took some time after the lesson to translate. So this is what I hope, inshallah, by the end of our class, by the end of this semester, we are able to complete this Muqaddimaat, and we are able to have the translation. So let me just go through it again in fast way. When we speak about Hukm Shar'i, huwa khitabullah ta'ala al-muta'alliq bi'af'al al-mukallafin. So we have the word khitabullah, and the meaning of khitabullah is what I mentioned, and this is the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what we studied in the knowledge of aqidah, when we mentioned that the one of the attributes of Allah, sifat ma'ani, is al-kalam. So the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it explains the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has relation with the actions of the mukallaf. This is what we meant by Hukm Shari. This is what we meant by Hukm Shari, because in the Quran, all of the Quran, consists of stories of prophets. The Quran consists of commandments and prohibitions. So when we speak about Hukm Shari, we are only concerned about the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has a connection or a relation with the actions of the mukallaf. So here we're speaking about commandments and prohibition. What are the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What are the prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to human beings or the mukallaf? So he said وَخِطَابُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى الْمُتَعَلِّقْ بِأَفْعَالِ الْمُكَلَّفِينَ, and then he mentioned the three types: al-talab, al-ibaha, al-wada'. So we have the three types of the three categories of Hukm Shari. Then he began by speaking about the meaning of talab. Talab is basically, it is a command. Talab is a command. So under commandment, there are of four types. Arba', he said. Al-ijab, wal-nadbu, wal-tahrim, wal-karaha. So we have the obligation, and then we have the recommendation, then we have the prohibition, and then we have the offensive. So I mentioned last week that the difference between ijab and nadab, obligation and recommendation, is that obligation, it is emphasized, that command is emphasized, whereas recommendation, the command is not emphasized. And the meaning of something that is emphasized, it has a punishment if it is not performed. So for example, we say the prayers is wajib, the 5 times daily prayers is wajib. If a person does not perform, there is punishment. There is a specific punishment to those who do not perform the obligation. So this is, we say, a commandment that is emphasized. A commandment that is emphasized, meaning there is a punishment assigned to it. Whereas recommendation is also a commandment, but it is not emphasized. So meaning there is no punishment assigned to it. And if, for example, and you say using the siwak is recommended. Using the siwak is sunnah. Meaning, if you do not use any of the siwak, there is no punishment. So this is any the difference between wajib and sunnah. Wajib and sunnah. Al-ijab, yani al-ijab, and it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is the one who make it wajib. An-nadab, Allah is the one who make it sunnah. So the difference is that one is emphasized and the other is not emphasized. This is just a revision. Likewise, when it comes to tahrim and karaha. So tahrim, it is a commandment to refrain. A commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to refrain from certain acts. Like zina, drinking liquor. Whereas karaha, is offensive. It is something that is not liked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah commanded us to refrain, but it is not emphasized. Whereas for tahrim or haram, what you call it? It is a commandment, or it is a commandment for us to refrain, and it comes with an emphasis. And again, when we speak about it comes with an emphasis, and it means there is a punishment to it. And if a person performs in the haram, there is a punishment. But if a person performs in the makruh, there is no punishment. But it is a commandment for us to refrain. Commandment for us to refrain. But if a person does it, there is no punishment. So it means that this is a commandment for us to refrain, and this commandment is not emphasized. So it becomes offensive. Doing it, and it becomes offensive. Some of you might ask, what is the difference between tahrim and haram? Tahrim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who makes it haram. This is the meaning of tahrim. Whereas haram is the action itself. For example, we say Allah makes zina haram. So this is tahrim. And the act of zina itself is haram. So there is a difference between tahrim and haram. Likewise, al-ijab and wajib. Al-ijab, Allah make it wajib, whereas wajib is the action. So for example, Allah makes the 5 time daily prayers wajib. This is ijab. The 5 time daily prayers is wajib. So when speaking about the actions, it is wajib. And the one who legislate that obligation is al-ijab. And it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is why in Islam, when we say la hukma illa lillah, maybe you want to write this down. La hukma illa lillah. I just type it. La hukma illa lillah. What is the meaning of la hukma illa lillah? It means there is no legislative laws except the laws of Allah. This is our belief in Islam. Yani our belief, and when it comes into iman, when it comes into faith, when it comes into believing part of our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that, and we believe only the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are obliged for us to believe in. Other than the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are not obliged to believe. And because other than the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the laws of men. We are not commanded for us to believe in any laws other than the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we speak about laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again we are speaking about khitabullah. That is why it is crucial to understand the meaning of khitabullah. Khitabullah al-muta'alliq bi af'al al-mukallafin. That's what we mentioned in our class. And then we have the ibaha. This is just a revision from last week. Al-ibaha is the choice. And Allah give you a choice whether you want to do or you do not want to do. For example, eating and drinking is mubah. Al-ibaha, meaning you have a choice to eat or not to eat. You have the choice to eat a certain type of food and to live a certain type of food. Likewise, when it comes to bathing, you have a choice to bathe one time a day, or 2 times a day, or once in 2 days, and so on and so forth. So this is the meaning of mubah. There are a lot of things that are mubah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the mukallaf the choice. And then we have come any towards what is considered any to be al-wada'. I think this also I have explained the meaning of tahrim. The meaning any of tahrim is the emphasized command to refrain from the unlawful acts. That's what I mentioned. There's so no need any for me to mention again. Al-karaha yani likewise any it is not any emphasized. Al-ibaha, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you any the choice to perform any certain things. And then we have come any to the third category of hukum syari. So again any hukum syari, and we have the three categories hukum syari. Number one is at-talab, number two is ibaha, number three is wada'. So number one is talab. Talab any how many categories any we have under talab? Talab any is command. So under yani talab any we have the four categories: al-ijab, an-nadab, and then we have tahrim and karaha. Under ibaha yani we have what you call it, only one, that is ibaha. And ibaha any meanings any you have any the choice any to do or not to do. And then we have al-wada'. Al-wada' yani it is situational. Yani the commandments any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are certain conditions and situations any attached to it. So this is any the meaning any of al-wada'. And this is any the third any category. So I will explain this again before we continue with our lesson today. So he mentioned wa amma al-wada'u fa huwa ibaratun an nasbi syari'i amaratan tadullu ala hukmin min tilka al-ahkam wa hiya as-sabab wa syartu wal mani'. So when we speak about hukum wada', yani we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he placed certain conditions and rules on certain of his commandments, and they are of three types. Number one is the sabab. We spoke about sabab in the last week, the reason. Number two is shart, that is the condition. Number three is mani', that is the preventive any factor. So let us go through this again inshallah with the example. So he began by speaking about what is the meaning of sabab, what is the meaning of shart. As you can see here today, I have translated this the Arabic into English, and inshallah once I complete the translation I will forward to all of you inshallah ta'ala. So let us go back to the meaning of sabab. What is the meaning of sabab? We gave the example of the time of zawal and the zuhur prayers. So for example, we say that the zuhur prayers is wajib, but it is not wajib for you to perform now. Now we are at 11:47 a.m. So we cannot perform the zuhur prayers. Why? Because the sabab is not in existence. What is the sabab? The sabab is the time of zawal. We can only perform zuhur prayers at the time of zawal. We cannot only perform any zuhur prayers at this particular time. So this kind of command to perform the zuhur prayers is connected to a reason. And that reason is that the time of zawal must come in, then only we can perform the zuhur prayers. So that is why the definition he mentioned, ma yalzamu min wujudihi al-wujud wa min adamihi al-adam. So when the reason comes in, then only you can perform any of the prayers. When the reason does not come in, you cannot perform any of the prayers. So meaning the performance of the prayers is dependent on the reason. And if the reason is in existence, then the commandment can be performed. If the reason is not in existence, then the commandment cannot be performed. So this is the example, kazawali shamsi li wujubi zuhr, like the time of zawal pertaining to the obligation of the performance of the zuhr prayers. So this is the meaning of sabab. The meaning of sabab, and there is a reason attached to the commandment. So this is point number one. Point number two, we have what is called as a shart, and you learn this in fiqh. Conditions, correct or not? For example, we have the conditions on the validity of wudu, conditions on the validity of tayammum, conditions on the validity of prayers. So we have any shart. So prayers is wajib. but you cannot any perform any prayers if you do not know the Qibla. You cannot any perform any of the prayers if you do not have wudu. You cannot any perform any prayers if you do not do a proper istinja. You cannot perform any of the prayers if you are not pure. All these are conditions. All these are conditions and before the performance of the obligations. But there is a difference between condition and reason. There is a difference between condition and reason. How do you know this difference? By looking at the definition. So earlier we mentioned that reason is something that its existence entails another existence. The existence of the time of zawal entails the obligation of the Zohar prayers. The existence of the time of zawal entails the existence of the obligation of the Zohar prayers. The non-existence of the time of zawal entails the non-existence of the obligation to perform any Zohar. Whereas ashart, he mentioned ma yalzamu min adamihil adam. Condition is something that its non-existence entails non-existence. So I translated as the condition is something that whose non-existence necessitates the non-existence of a ruling. So for example, the non-existence of ablution, the non-existence of ablution necessitates the invalidity of prayers. The non-existence of ablution necessitates the non-existence of prayers. For example, imagine the time of Zohar has come. The time of Zohar has come and I want to perform any of the Zohar prayers. But I do not have ablution. And then I perform Zohar prayers. I perform any of the Zohar prayers, but in reality, there is no Zohar prayers. I perform the Zohar prayers, but in reality, there is no Zohar prayers any perform. Why? Because the Zohar prayers that I perform is not valid. So even though I perform any of the Zohar prayers, but because I do not fulfill the condition of the performance of Zohar prayers, it is as though it is non-existence. Zohar prayers is non-existence. So here he mentioned ma yalzamu min adamihi al-adam. So when the conditions is non-existence, the actions will also be non-existence because of its invalidity. And we can give a lot of example. Likewise, as what I mentioned, a person is in a state of janaba, or if a person has no wudu, or a person does not take his istinja, does not do istinja properly, or a person who is praying not at the Qibla, not at the Qibla, so he can perform the prayers, but the prayers is non-existence, meaning it is not valid. Wala yalzam min wujudihil wujud, and it's non-exist, and whose existence does not necessitate the existence of a ruling. Meaning, let us use the example of wudu. So if you take wudu, is it necessary that you pray? If you have any wudu, is it necessary that you perform any prayers? No. Now when we are in a state of wudu, it is not necessary that I am in a state of wudu, I perform any prayers. There are people who take ablution but they do not pray, for example. So this is the reason, the difference between conditions and reason. When it comes to reason, we say, when the reason exists, the obligation exists, or the ruling exists. But when it comes to condition, it is not necessary. It is not necessary. But in order to perform the obligation or to perform that action, the conditions must be present. Then only the actions is in existence. And then the third one we have wal mani'. Mani' is the preventive factor. For example, inshallah, questions after this, I will go to the questions. You can type your questions. Now we speak about al-mani'. Al-mani' is a parable of, for example, we say menses. The reason comes in. The reason zawal the time of zawal comes in. So the time of zawal is in existence. We have entered into the time of zawal. And then a person takes ablution. But she cannot perform the prayers. Why? Because of menses. So menses is a preventive any factor. So in order for a person to perform any the prayers, the reason must be there, yani the zawal prayers, the condition must be there, yani he or she must be in a state of ablution, and then there must be no preventive any factor, that a woman is not in a state of menses, because if she is in a state of menses, then she cannot perform any of the prayers. So the definition of al-mani, ma yalzamu min wujudihi al-adam. This is the opposite. When comes into the preventive any factor, its existence and it entails and then necessitates the non-existence in your ruling. The non-existence, the non-existence in your prayers. Whenever this preventive factor is in existence, the action becomes non-existent, meaning she cannot perform, he or she cannot perform any that particular action. Ma yalzamu min wujudihi al-adam wala yalzamu min adamihi wujudun wala adam. And then whose non-existence does not necessitate the existence of a ruling, then the definition goes on, nor its existence independently. I didn't translate this fully. The preventive factor is something that whose existence necessitates the non-existence of the ruling, and whose non-existence, this is the part, and whose non-existence does not necessitate the existence of a ruling, nor is non any existence. So we give the example of menses. We give the example of menses. If a woman does not have menses, not having menses does not necessitate the existence in your prayers, nor the non-existence in your prayers. If a woman does not have any menses, it does not have any effect on the what you call it, obligation in your prayers and the performance in your prayers. It does not give any effect. So if a woman is not in a state of menses, it does not mean that the prayers is obligatory upon her. The prayers can only be obligatory upon her if the reason is there. Correct or not? If the reason of obligation on the prayers is there, and the conditions is there. So by just having the preventive factor does not give effect to the ruling of the action that is performed. So these are the three types of hukum al-wada'. So now inshallah we will go on into our lesson today. I think our lesson today lastly we have come into this point, I think. But I just run through it again inshallah ta'ala, so that we are clear on this. Now we will speak about the second type of hukum. So what I have explained is basically hukum shar'i. So hukum shar'i, khitabullah al-muta'alliq bi af'al al-mukallafin. The speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are related to the actions of the mukallaf. And they are of three types. At-talab, commandments, and then we have al-ibaha, choices, and then we have al-wada', situations. So the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to the actions of the mukallaf, they are of these three types. So we spoke about talab, we mentioned talab, there are four types. And then we spoke about ibaha, and then we spoke about wada'. Wada', how many types we have? We have the three types: as-sabab, shart, and mani'. So if the sabab is present, and the conditions are present, and the mani' is not present, then the action is valid. Maybe I give one more example. When comes to fara'id, husband and wife, for example, one of them pass away. So we say that the husband, for example, the wife passed away. So the husband get the inheritance. So number one, the reason for the husband getting the inheritance is because of the relationship between him and the wife. So because he has the relationship, that is why he inherit from that person. This is point number one. And then we have the condition. The condition is the existence of the husband after the death of the wife. If the wife pass away first, and the husband and is still alive, then the husband will inherit any from the wife. And number 3, there must be no preventive factor. So for example, if the husband kills any the wife, then the husband and he cannot inherit, because killing any is mani'. Killing is a form any of preventive factor that makes any a person not able any to inherit. So this is another example of what we call it, to speak any about the 3 types of things that is related to hukum wada'. Now we will speak any about hukum al-adi, as what you see in the screen. The author any mentioned wa ammal hukmul adi. Wa ammal hukmul adi. So we have hukm shar'i, khitabullah al-muta'alliq bi af'al al-mukallafin, and then now we have hukm al-adi. I gave the translation of hukm al-adi as the empirical laws. The empirical laws. So we get the translation first, then inshallah things will become any clearer. So he mentioned فَهُوَ إِثْبَاتُ رَبْطِ بَيْنَ أَمْرٍ وَأَمْرٍ وُجُودًا وَعَدَمًا بِوَاسِطَةِ التَّكَرُّرِ مَعَ صِحَّةِ التَّخَلُّفِ وَعَدَمُ تَأْثِيرِ أَحَدِهِمَا فِي الْآخَرِ الْبَتَّةِ. As for the empirical law, it is the affirmation of a binding factor between a ruling to another, both in its existence and non-any existence. طيب, let us give a simple example. When comes to fire, fire burns. Fire burns. How do you know that fire burns? You observe many times, repetition, correct or not? Many times, and you observe that fire burns. That when you put something on fire, it burns. When you put any food on fire, it burns. So this becomes hukm al-adi. This becomes what we mentioned as empirical laws. You know, the West they use this word empirical, it has relation to the senses, to observation. When we are thirsty, we drink water. Because of our experience and our observation and our senses, then we have been drinking water since we live. And we have that experience that water is a reason to quench our thirst. So whenever we are thirsty, we drink water. Whenever we are hungry, we find food. Likewise, when it comes to fire. Likewise, when it comes to sickness. When a person is sick, he will eat a certain type of medicine. If a person he has fever, he takes Panadol. Why he takes Panadol? And because of the experience and the observation. Then in the past, that when I'm sick, I take Panadol, and by the grace of Allah, I'm well. So Panadol is the asbab. Panadol is the means for me to attain cure. So due to this repetition and due to this observation, a certain ruling is established. A certain law is established. This one the author is speaking about. So he said that it is the affirmation of a binding factor. What is the meaning of binding factor? So for example, the binding factor between water and the quenching of thirst. Is there a binding factor that when you are thirsty, you drink water? Water quenches the thirst. This is the binding factor. So when it comes to empirical laws, hukmul adi, it binds the means and the effect. It binds the means and the effect, but through what? Through repetition and observation. And this is in science anyway, when we speak about the knowledge of physics and chemistry, when it comes to experiments, these are based on empirical laws. That based on experiments, based on observation, we are able to find a conclusion. So that any conclusion is the result of observation and the result of repetition. So for example, when we found out for example a certain disease can be cured by a certain plant. A certain disease but can be cured by a certain plant. So let us again give the example of this coronavirus. So scientists came up with the vaccination. They came out with the vaccination. When they came out with the vaccination, and what do? They do experiments. Correct or not? Because they themselves they are not sure whether the vaccine that they have created can actually cure the people afflicted by coronavirus. So what do? They give months of experimentation. They do experiments. They do experiments, and then after that they come to the conclusion based on the results that they have done, and based after some repetitions, they are able to come up with the conclusion. But this is not something that is definite. This is not something that is definite. Why? Because it is based on experiments, and it is based on observation, and this can change. This can change. So this is a type of empirical laws. So we bind the sickness with the cure. We bind the sickness with the cure. This particular medicine, it has been proven again and again that is able to cure this particular sickness. So when we are sick, we take this medicine. So now we are binding the medicine with the cure. So this is what he mentioned, the affirmation of a binding factor. How does this binding factor comes? It comes by repetition. This is the thing about empirical laws. It comes by experimentation and experience. So it is not something that is based on purely rational thought, but it is based on experimentation and observation. And this is basically the laws of physics. When you speak about laws of physics are based on the empirical laws. It is different than mathematics. Mathematics are based on purely rational. For example, when we say 2 plus 2 equals to 4, 3 plus 3 equals to 6, this is not based on experiment and observation, but this is based on rationality. So there is a difference between empirical laws and rational laws. Like after this, we speak about rational laws. But to make it simple for us to differentiate between empirical laws and rational laws, we make the comparison between physics when it comes to experimentations and mathematics. So physics are based on empirical laws, although some of it of course has mathematical functions, but it is different than the mathematics. Mathematics are based on hukm al-aql, on the rational laws, as after this that we will speak about. So the difference is when we have this binding factor that is based on repetition and experimentation. So this is where the empirical laws comes into place. So he mentioned between a ruling to another in its existence and non-existence. So the example we gave, for example, fever and Panadol. Fever and Panadol. So we bind Panadol into fever. How do we bind Panadol into fever? When a person has fever, the cure is Panadol. When a person has fever, the cure is Panadol. A person has fever, he eats Panadol, and he becomes cure. He becomes cured, and this is based on his past experience. But he said ma'asihatu takhalluf. But he might take Panadol, but he might not be cured. So there is no guarantee. But based on the past, empirical laws are all about the past. Based on the past and experiences, there is cure. But we cannot guarantee that the upcoming and when a person is sick, that he will attain any cure. So empirical laws can change. So whenever we speak about experimentation and observation, it can change. This is the thing about hukmul adi. So he says ma'sihati takhallufi wa adamu ta'siri ahadihima fil akhar. Now this is important. Adamu ta'sir. When it comes to empirical laws, it does not have any efficacy. It does not have efficacy. What does it mean? Earlier we gave the example of Panadol and sickness. So we say that a person has fever, he takes Panadol, and based on his experience, he attains cure whenever he eats Panadol. But Panadol itself does not have any efficacy. It does not have any efficacy. The one who gives the effect is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Panadol is just asbab. Panadol is just an asbab. It doesn't mean that human beings, when they are used to something, it means that particular thing has effect. Nothing has effects except it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who created Panadol, and Allah is the one who created the efficacy of cure in Panadol. So when a person eats any Panadol and he becomes any cure, it is not any Panadol that cures him, but it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the asbab and the creator of the effect. Clear inshallah? Likewise, when we speak about fire and burning, so it is not fire that burns. It is not fire that burns. Based on our observation, we see fire burns. But in reality, the efficacy of burning comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not fire. Likewise, when it comes to drinking water, when we are thirsty, we drink any water. So based on our experience, water can quench thirst. But in reality, it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who quench. Allah is the one who created any quenching, and Allah is the one who created the asbab, the water. So when comes to the empirical laws, we say that these are binding factors based on observation and experimentation, and it can change, and there is no efficacy in these laws. The laws of physics is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is why when we speak about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the miracles of prophets and messengers, we say these are based on hukmul adi, because the laws of nature, the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, all of it are creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam traveled from Makkah to Baitul Maqdis in one night, now this is not any impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the laws of movements and the laws of nature and physics are creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change these laws. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change these laws. So when we speak about science, we speak about empirical laws that are created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change these laws, and nothing gives any effect except that it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of everything. So when we speak about the laws of causation, cause and effect, we say cause comes from Allah, effects also comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As what we learn in Aqidah, nothing gives effect except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whenever a Muslim believes that there is something else other than Allah and he gives effect, he falls into shirk automatically. So that is why it is important for us to be careful and to understand properly this definition and this inequality. So we make a differentiation between asbab and the effect that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we say that asbab does not give effect. Effect only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is basically the meaning of hukmul adi. The meaning of hukmul adi, it is rulings that are based on repetitions and observation by a binding factor that does not have the efficacy. Because efficacy comes from Allah. I did not translate this fully. I missed the second part of the translation. Actually this only comes from here. See, all these things have not translated yet. Inshallah, the translation once it's complete then I will pass you. Otherwise, I won't give you now because I'm still working on the translation. Now I go to your questions. There are two questions here that is asked. The wudu does not necessitate prayer. Yeah, wudu does not necessitate prayer. Meaning now you have wudu. Does it mean that you have wudu, prayer is wajib? This is the question. Now all of us are in a state of ablution. Does it mean that it is wajib for you to pray now because then you have wudu? No. Does it mean that the obligation of prayer comes whenever you take wudu? No. Now I take wudu at 11 a.m. Does it mean that I have to pray Zohar prayers? No, Zohar prayers is not any wajib. Now it's not any wajib. Why? Because the time of Zohar has not come. So it doesn't mean that I take wudu. It is obligatory for me to pray Zohar at any point of time. Wudu is a condition. Meaning if the time of Zohar has come, the obligation of Zohar has come, when I want to pray Zohor, then I must make sure that I must be in a state of wudu. So it is a condition and it is not a reason. This is the difference between a sabab and a shart. We can say that the Sharia does actually accept means to the explanation of hukum adi, thus invalidating some claims that there is no need for asbab because everything is taken care of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, the thing is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created this world, Darul Asbab. We are living in a world that is full of means. For example, when we are thirsty, we drink water. Yeah, who is the one who created water? Allah. Who is the one who bind the drinking of water and the quenching of thirst? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who is the one who gives the effects of quenching? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So everything is created by Allah. The need to drink, when we are thirsty we drink, this binding comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, the efficacy of quenching comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So everything is a creation of Allah. Water is a creation of Allah, human beings are a creation of Allah, quenching is a creation of Allah, the need to drink water is also a creation of Allah, and the effects of the asbab is also a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we speak about empirical laws, we are speaking about laws that are created by Allah. Laws that are created. Who is the one who created the law? This factor of drinking water when a person is thirsty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah wants Allah does not create any thirst in human beings. Meaning, if Allah wants Allah won't make you thirsty all your life. Possible. For example, angels, they do not eat and drink. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants human beings not to consume any water, and human beings can survive without the consumption of water, Allah can make that happen. But Allah ordains that human beings are such and such, that is in are living in such and such laws that is binding him while he is on the face of this earth. So all these things what we are saying are creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But again, we say the efficacy comes from Allah, not from the asbab. So we have to differentiate between asbab and the efficacy of things that happens. We say everything happens by Allah, not by asbab. The next question is hukum adi, the same as hukum adat. No, when we speak about adat in the linguistic sense, when we speak about customs, they are not the same. Here we are speaking about hukumul adi in aqidah. When you speak about customs, when you speak about civilization and the custom of certain people and certain people, that is different. That is different. Hukumadi is a form of mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we are allowed to live. No, this is an ordainment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, Allah is not in need of hukum adi. Allah is not in need of creating all these things around us. For example, Allah is not in need of the clouds to bring down rain. Correct or not? If Allah wants, Allah can bring down rain without clouds. If Allah wants, Allah can make you quench without you drinking water. If Allah wants, Allah can make you full without you eating. If He wants. But He is testing human beings. How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala test human beings? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created around human beings all these creations and cause and effects. And at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling human beings, do not be deluded by this. Do not be deluded by this world. Because everything that happens, it happens by Allah. So it is a test of iman. So for example, many human beings are deluded into thinking, for example, that water can quench my thirst. If I have money, I have success. If I have the dunya, I have everything. Many people are deluded into this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, بَلْ تُؤْثِرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. But human beings, you are always giving preference into the dunya. Why? Because we are always deluded by the things around us. So the test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is how are we able to come to this understanding that everything happens by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not any by the asbab. The asbab any are all creations any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is any the benefit of learning aqidah, the benefit any of learning hukmun yani adi and hukmul aqli. Wallahu alam any bisawab. Any please write your attendance for those who are attending this class. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adhaban nar. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.